Welcome to the Boroondara Creative Network. My name is Bridget and I'm from Boroondara Arts. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Today we're excited to present this Creative Network session to you online with guest speaker Janine Hendy from the Guild of Objects. The Guild of Objects do some fantastic work with coaching and mentoring creatives and providing advice on how they can generate an income from their artistic practice. In today's short presentation, Janine will be talking about the importance of documenting and evaluating your creative projects, especially when it comes to funding and acquittals. After this video, you're invited to continue the conversation with Janine and others from the Boroondara Creative Network. Boroondara Arts and the Guild of Objects will be hosting an online conversation on Saturday the 23rd of May from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. We would love for you to join in and to connect with one another. And for more information about how you can do so, please email me at arts@boroondara.vic.gov.au. So enjoy the presentation and we look forward to chatting to you soon.
Hello and welcome. My name is Janine Hendy and I'm from the Guild of Objects. The Guild of Objects aims to support all creatives in generating income from their business. And I'm here today to talk to you about grants. Specifically, we're going to talk about project documentation, how you get to the end of it all in one piece, different measurements for specific projects, what kind of valuation tools are available, and how is it that you measure impact. But before I start, I think it's important to ascertain what actually is a project. And we tend to define a project as something that has specific goals and it has a start point and an end point. And when we talk about projects in terms of their specific goals, we need to know what projects are trying to achieve, how much they're going to cost, who's going to be interested in the project, and who's going to manage the project. And when we're talking about arts and creative based projects, it's usually the artist who's going to manage the project. And therefore it's important to talk about, i.e., what do you want to achieve and how are you going to measure what it is you want to achieve. And the first thing that we think about is, well, what's your objective? And when you're applying for grants in particular, your objective needs to be really specific. It's what is the project going to accomplish? But if we're talking about objectives, one of the first things that you're going to be confronted with as a creative is, well, how do you measure outcome? How do I know when I've achieved what it is that I set out to achieve? And importantly, how can you demonstrate that to your funding bodies? So when we look at objectives for projects, the first thing you do is set a goal, and those goals need to be what we call SMART. SMART's merely an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time frame specific. But what is it that we mean by all of those things? If something's specific, it's got a greater chance of being accomplished. So you're really going to nail down on what it is you're hoping to achieve. So you're going to ask yourself 5 why questions in terms of identifying a specific goal. Firstly, who's going to be involved in the project and who's going to be involved in achieving the actual goal. What is it that you really want to accomplish? Where is the goal going to be achieved? When do you want to achieve the goal? And importantly, why do you want to achieve the goal? So think about specifically who, what, where, when and why you want to achieve a specific project. The second letter in the acronym SMART is measurable. A SMART goal needs to be measurable. And when we're talking about something that's measurable, we're talking about how much, how am I going to know when I've achieved the goal, and what is my indicator of progress? Your goal needs to be achievable. Do you actually have the resources and capabilities to achieve the goals? And look around, ask yourself, has someone else done this before you? If so, then you've got evidence that it is achievable. Is your goal realistic? Can you achieve it with the resources that you have? And importantly, are you measuring your goals within a specific time frame? Does your goal have a deadline? And what will you do when you achieve that deadline? So set your measurement and make sure your goals are smart. But we also recognise that sometimes you need to set qualitative objectives. Qualitative objectives are objectives that sometimes can't be measured. And people are handing out money, they usually like things to be measured. But if you understand the nuances of what a qualitative objective is, then you can wrap some measurements around them and you can still make your objectives smart. Now, the main qualitative objectives, so quantitative, those objectives that can be measured; qualitative, those objectives that are measured by some kind of observation. And the main qualitative objectives that we find in the creative community is measuring social impact. Social impact is enormous, and I suspect that social impact is going to continue to be significant as we move out of this COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to be more concerned with the things that impact upon society in general. So what is social impact? Social impact is about long-term positive changes for individuals, for communities and society, and these are changes that you can implement through your particular project. What are some of what we might refer to as social impact from creative pursuits? And it might be about increasing diversity, increasing access to a particular art form or activity. It might be about increasing volunteering, simply generating attendance, or specifically generating attendance for specific groups. For example, you might have a project that's specifically about getting domestic abuse survivors into or engaging in a creative pursuit, and that would be a social impact. If we look at it in a more business perspective, the kinds of social impacts that we've seen over the last few years are things like creating change, supply chain management, so making sure your supply chain is ethical, sourcing and selling fair trade products. You might have social responsibility and labour practices, employment programs, community programs, and simply bringing people together. So social impact is a really important part of any grant or any project that you may be involved in. And it's important to be able to measure your social impact, because you can report back to your funders with reports. So you've got accountability. Accountability is really important. You can use it to increase fundraising if you're wanting to move on to other projects. You can use it as a feedback loop to help learn and improve as you engage with more projects. Powerful stories, so look at some of the firms that have engaged in social impact, the Thank You Group, Tom's Shoes. They've got really, really powerful stories that they can use in their marketing and communication, and also to generate more funds. And also gives you an opportunity to make connections and collaborate with other organisations. So when we talk about measuring social impact, really what we're talking about is things like measuring equity, measuring access, measuring environment. And so the kind of questions that you're going to ask yourself is, to what extent does the problem exist and who's it affecting? And how much change can I create in terms of bringing change around to who is being affected? Think about what your outputs are and the immediate result of your activities in terms of attendance, for example. You can identify short-term and long-term social changes in terms of the outcomes and the income or the attribution of the outcome of your activity on creating change. So there's lots of ways you can evaluate your projects and help you manage indeed your projects. Some of the other things that we use are process evaluation. So has your project reached a target group? Are the activities actually reaching a specific target group, and have you tightly defined who that target group is? What are the who are the stakeholders that are associated with your project? And have you got some kind of measurement of satisfaction for those stakeholders? What changes have been made to any intended activities? And are the materials, the activities, the projects that you're looking at working suitable for your target audience, or do they need to be changed as a result? We again can look at impact evaluation overall and determine whether your project has achieved its impact and whether you've got desirable short-term, medium-term, long-term impacts depending on how long your project is. It's important to evaluate projects on the basis of their outcome and did you achieve what you'd set out to achieve, and look at some kind of satisfaction measures. And those satisfaction measures can be not only with the intended audience, but they can be with those that have participated in the activity. So along some outcome, we can also look at what's called summative evaluation. And when we look at summative evaluation, did the project continue from start to finish? Is it possible to implement this project into other settings and other environments? How sustainable is the project, short-term and long-term? So you might have short-term programs that are really only applicable, for example, whilst we're in home isolation or during the current pandemic, but they're not going to be applicable outside of that time frame. Look at what elements may have helped your project or hindered your project, and what recommendations would you make that have evolved out of your program. So you've evaluated your program, your project. What are the kinds of things that you need to consider? And consider, for example, in terms of potential pitfalls. And if by knowing and understanding the pitfalls at the outset, you can perhaps more easily implement your project, you can more easily manage your project, and you can more easily measure your project for social impact change. So what are the kinds of things that you need to think about right at the outset when you're looking at commencing a project? And you've got to look at budget. Can you complete the project on time? Can you complete a project within budget? And is your project meeting its quality standards? Are all the items that occurred within the scope, within the project, operating within scope, or have you changed the parameters as to how you're operating the project as you're going along? When you look at projects and you're looking at pitfalls, ask yourself, was it a good project to work for? Were the people working on the project satisfied? Were the people for whom the project was intended actually satisfied? And were everyone's needs met? What's going to guarantee your success whilst managing a project? You've got to make sure that there's no conflicting criteria within the project parameters. Prioritise your criteria so everything is straightforward and there is no conflict, and that you personally don't have any conflict of interest. When we look at the criteria for the parameters within the project, make sure there's neither too few nor too many criteria. Too few criteria, then you're going to overlook stuff that's important. Too many criteria, then you're going to get sidetracked and not focus on your end objective. Make sure the criteria for any project is not ambiguous, that it's very straightforward. And make sure at the end that you can value success in a binary way, and that means success of a project isn't necessarily a yes or no question. Projects, particularly projects within the Arts Centre, are complex, and it's often difficult to give a black and white answer. So if you understand your project, understand the parameters, but that you have really clear objectives. So I get back to the SMART objectives. Your objectives are specific, they're measurable, they're actionable, they're realistic, and they're time frame specific. And if you clearly use that criteria to identify your social impact and the potential outputs of any project, and you come back to that, then you can most certainly identify how to evaluate your project in what we refer a non-binary way. You can evaluate your project much more easily using your social impact criteria. So I hope that this has helped you in identifying some of the things that you need in terms of setting up and managing a creative project. And I will be around to answer any questions for you in a couple of days. Nice to chat. Thanks. Bye.